Morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are located. We're so happy to have you with us today and that you're spending your time in our McKinney-Vento 101 session. Let's get this show on the road. So welcome to Schoolhouse Connections, I think first big webinar of the year. Schoolhouse Connection, of course, is a national nonprofit organization working to overcome homelessness through education. We have a number of programs that we offer, including policy-related programs, and most importantly, practical assistance to school districts, charter schools, institutions of higher education, and early childhood programs. If you check out our website, you'll find lots and lots of resources. I particularly want to point out to you our Q&A from our inbox. We take questions that we receive from you and your colleagues around the country. We kind of depersonalize them, and then we save them into an ongoing living Q&A document on our website. So a lot of the questions that you have, you're probably going to find answered in that document. So take a look at that. We also want to let you know about our Youth Leadership and Scholarship Program. It is a national scholarship program for students who will be entering college for the first time in the fall of 2023, who have experienced homelessness. So again, if you hop on our website, you'll be able to get our YLS application. It is open now. So now is a perfect time to share it with your students, and hopefully they can be part of our next cohort of scholars. We also want to make you aware of something we're really excited about. We've been working hard on. Coming up in October, we will be offering online modules for specific school staff. They're short modules. They include videos, quizzes. They offer certificates of completion, and we will be sending out information soon with pricing and purchase options, so you can take a look at that resource and see if that would be something that might be helpful for your school district, charter school, or community. So my name is Patricia Julianell. I am our Director of Program Advancement and Legal Affairs here at Schoolhouse Connection. Let me pause for a minute. I want to give Erin and Karen the opportunity to introduce yourselves quickly if you'd like to.
Hi, everyone. I'm Erin Patterson, Director of Education Initiatives.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. I am Karen Rice. I'm the Senior Program Manager of Education Initiatives.
Thank you very much. Erin and Karen are going to be critical parts of our webinar team today. What we're going to be doing for the next 90 minutes or so is providing you with a McKinney-Vento 101, an overview of some of the biggest issues in McKinney-Vento, such as the definition of homelessness, identification, school of origin, enrollment, removing barriers. We will have the opportunity to take questions from you. Because we have so many people on the webinar today, we're going to ask you not to unmute yourself because I think it might get a little bit chaotic, but you're welcome to type questions into the chat at any time throughout the presentation. We'll be answering some questions in the chat. We'll answer others live over the webinar. We apologize in advance. We're probably not going to be able to get to all your questions, but we'll get to as many as we can. And then we're trying something a little bit differently today. I'm sure you saw this in the webinar description when you signed up. We are going to create the opportunity for you to go into breakout rooms towards the end of the session. We have created breakout rooms based on registration for today. So there are some that are school district specific. There are some that are state specific. We have breakouts particularly for charter schools, particularly for other groups. So we'll get to that towards the end of the presentation, but that will be coming soon. Now, to get us started, we want to jump into this with a poll and get some input from you right away. So hopefully you will see popping up on your screen shortly a poll. We'd like to hear about your greatest challenges so far this year. If I created the poll correctly, you will be able to click on more than one answer. So you can pick the largest challenges that you're facing. I know we have had a series of particularly challenging school years over the past few years, but we're interested in what are the biggest challenges you're facing so that we can really think about how we might be able to support you. So we'll give you a little bit of time to complete that poll. And thank you all so much for introducing yourselves in the chat. I also want to point out that Karen has pasted into the chat a link where you can access the slides from today's presentation. You should be able to see them and you should be able to download them. So those will remain available. We're not planning on taking that link down. So you can grab those slides whenever it's convenient. So I think that's enough time for the poll. Erin, if you're able to shut the poll and share the results, maybe we can see what people are saying about their biggest challenges. And I'm not actually seeing the poll. I think it might be because I'm the host. Erin or Karen, are either one of you seeing it?
Yep, not surprisingly, I can give a quick readout. Transportation took the cake on this one. About 45% of people indicated that was a major challenge. Not too far behind was identification. About 35% identified identification as a challenge. And then it looks like if I'm scrolling down here, attendance also is an issue, 41% of folks, followed by staff turnover, need for professional development, re-engaging students who left school, unaccompanied youth, and then removing barriers and immediate enrollment.
Thanks, Erin. I appreciate the assistance. I can't quite see the poll. Not surprising about transportation. Hopefully, I'd like to think that our online modules might be able to help with some of that staff turnover and professional development needs, hopefully. So thank you for sharing that. Let's jump into the content of our session. A little bit of background to start with. I think sometimes when people are not familiar with the McKinney-Vento Act or student homelessness, people sometimes wonder, well, why do we have a whole federal law about homelessness and education? And I think those of you who have been doing this for a while know that there are lots and lots of reasons for that. But I think one important reason is that education is really a very, very critical opportunity to interrupt a potential cycle of homelessness. We know that homelessness causes chronic health problems, trauma, and mobility, and these kinds of problems can lead to very difficult outcomes for students in school. So our students experiencing homelessness have very high rates of chronic absenteeism. They tend to have twice the rate of suspensions and expulsions from school, and lower graduation rates. And then when we see these lower graduation rates, we look at the largest national study of youth and young adult homelessness that's ever been done, which found that the lack of a high school degree is the greatest single risk factor for young adult homelessness. So you can see that if we can't interrupt this cycle and help our students to get a high school diploma, they're going to be much more likely to experience homelessness as young adults and when they're starting their own families and then potentially perpetuating that into their own families. So the McKinney-Vento Act and the work that you all do to help students access education is not only critical for all of the things that schools are providing to our students today, but it's also critical for the opportunities for employment and earning a living wage that it can provide to students in the future to prevent ongoing homelessness. So that's really where the McKinney-Vento Act comes in. This law was originally passed a long time ago, back in 1987, last updated in 2015 as part of Every Student Succeeds. And the McKinney-Vento Act applies to school districts and public charter schools. So anything considered a local educational agency or LEA is going to be subject to the McKinney-Vento Act. And as you'll see as we go through that the goals really are to ensure the identification, enrollment, and success in school, including preschool, for our children and youth who are experiencing homelessness. So let's start with that definition of homelessness and who's eligible for the protections of the McKinney-Vento Act. The definition applies to children and youth who lack a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. But the definition also goes into a lot of detail about what that really means, those three words, fixed, regular, and adequate. So you'll see on your slide bullets that are verbatim from the law. So students who are sharing the housing of others due to loss of housing, economic hardship, or a similar reason meet the McKinney-Vento definition of homelessness. We know that when families or youth lose their housing, unfortunately, more times than not, there's really no place for them to go in the community. The shelters may be full, they may be unavailable. Families may not want to enter shelters for a variety of reasons related to safety and other things. So we find that about 3/4 of the McKinney-Vento students that schools are identifying and serving are living in this situation of sharing housing with another family, another person, sometimes a total stranger, due to losing their housing, economic hardship, or a similar reason. Some of you may have heard this referred to as doubled up or tripled up. So that's really the largest category under the definition in terms of the numbers of students in the situation. Additional categories include living in motels, hotels, trailer parks, or campgrounds due to the lack of adequate alternative accommodations. And in all of these definitions, in law school, they teach us you've got to read the whole sentence. You can't just stop at the beginning. So we really are looking at, is a family in that living situation due to the lack of an adequate alternative? I think trailer parks are a really important example here. My mother lives in a trailer park in Florida. Some of you have probably been to these retirement communities that are just these giant trailer parks where people drive around in golf carts and play bingo on Wednesday nights. That's where my mom lives, and her trailer is perfectly adequate for her. She's got a bathroom and electricity and hot water and windows and all those good things that you want to have in adequate housing. She's not living there due to the lack of an adequate alternative. She's living there because she really enjoys it and it's fun for her. So, we're really looking at the adequacy of some of these situations. Some of them are never going to be adequate, living in a campground, unless you happen to be the person who works at the campground and you have an adequate accommodation because you live there on site. But, for the most part, some of these situations are never going to be adequate, but we always want to ask that question. Another category is kind of obvious: living in emergency shelters or transitional shelters or living situations, living in cars or parks, public spaces, living in a bus station. These are some of the more perhaps stereotypical situations that you would think of when you think of homelessness. And here also we have that idea of substandard housing. Is the housing adequate for children? Is it safe for children? Do they have electricity? Do they have running water? Do they have windows, or are they all busted out? Do they have holes in the floor? Are there infestations of vermin or mice or other things that would make it unsafe for a child to be living there? So that's really what you're looking at when you're looking at that substandard condition. And you can see as you look through these different words, right? We want to always stay very close to the letter of the law. We want to ask, what is the current living situation? We're not so much interested, necessarily in how they got there. We're really looking at, where are these children living now? Is it fixed, regular, and adequate? Some of these situations could be a little bit gray. We really encourage people, if you are not the liaison in your school district, absolutely contact your liaison, whether it's in a district or a charter school. You're going to want their guidance, and they really are the person who ultimately has that responsibility and authority to identify students experiencing homelessness. If you are the liaison and it's a gray area, contact your state coordinator. You can contact us at Schoolhouse Connection. I've been doing this for almost 25 years, and there are still situations where I'm not sure, and I'll bounce it off of Karen or Aaron or Barbara in my office and say, what do you think about this? So that's really an important part, I think, of implementing the McKinney-Vento Act is asking for help when you need it and getting that support. So we're here to help you with that too. The other definition I wanted to cover with you is unaccompanied youth. Again, this is defined in the law as a child or youth who is living in one of those homeless situations that we just discussed and is not in the physical custody of a parent or guardian. So they may have a parent or guardian out there who has legal custody of them and presumably, should be providing them housing, but currently the student is not with that parent or guardian. Now, it may be that the student has left home because of abuse or neglect. We know there are very, very high rates of both physical and sexual abuse among our unaccompanied youth. I read a survey done of unaccompanied youth in California. This is a while ago, probably about 10 years old at this point, but in the survey, 2/3 of youth said that they felt safer living on the streets in California than they had felt in their own homes with their parents or guardians. So a lot of youth are fleeing really severe situations at home, oftentimes related to parental substance abuse, sometimes related to parental mental illness. And a lot of these problems can be invisible to us on the outside. We don't necessarily know what's happening in the four walls of a home. So our responsibility in the school system is just to implement the McKinney-Vento Act and provide these youth with immediate access to an education. We also know that sometimes parents force young people out of their homes because of disagreements about pregnancy, sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. So we do see disproportionality among our youth experiencing homelessness for those who are LGBTQ+ and those who are pregnant or parenting. And we're going to show you some data on that in just a slide or two. Oh, just a slide or two. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, this is done in high schools and sometimes in middle schools around the country every 2 years. And most states at this point have a question on the Youth Risk Behavior Survey that asks about homelessness. And it uses the definition that I just shared with you. And so on this survey, students are asked to indicate if they've been in any of these different homeless situations over the past 30 days, only the past 30 days, not the whole school year. And looking at 2019 data, which is the most recent data that we've been able to analyze, over 5% of high school students said that they had experienced homelessness in just the last 30 days. So, obviously this may be a little bit higher in some areas, maybe a little bit lower, but you can think that in a typical classroom, there's a pretty high likelihood that there's at least one student at any given time experiencing homelessness in the classroom. And so that's part of the reason why it's so important to get this information out to teachers and others who work in your school buildings. And so, we're really happy that you're here. This session is being recorded, and you're going to be more than welcome to share both the PowerPoint and the recording with anyone in your school or school district or state that you'd like to. In terms of that disproportionality that I mentioned earlier, it's really important for us to be aware and to constantly be thinking about who is impacted by homelessness. Homelessness impacts all kinds of children and families across all communities, rural, suburban, urban, all over the country. But it's important to recognize that students of color are much more likely to experience homelessness. So Black high school students, Hispanic high school students, and American Indian or Native high school students also were either a little bit more, or a little bit less than 2 times more likely to experience homelessness than their white peers. Students who identified as lesbian, bisexual, gay, or questioning were also about 2 times more likely to experience homelessness than those who identified as straight. And again, this is self-reported by students, so it's how they identify themselves. And then the last 2 numbers are so hugely out of proportion. So students in high school who identify as transgender were over 9 times more likely to experience homelessness than those who do not identify as transgender. And students who are either pregnant or have gotten someone pregnant, to their knowledge, are 10 times more likely to experience homelessness. So I think these numbers are really important as we go into the next slide around identification and how are you identifying students experiencing homelessness in your school or district, to make sure that those techniques and those strategies are really deliberately reaching out to your pregnant and parenting programs and students, your LGBTQ or Gay Straight Alliance or whatever programs you may or may not have in your district. You might be reaching out to community agencies that are serving those populations as well. And absolutely making sure that all of your strategies are very sensitive to students of color, that you're providing information in a way that's not, could be considered intimidating, in multiple languages, et cetera, and culturally sensitive. A few strategies for identification. I think the most important one is don't use the word homeless. If you go back to the definition that I just went over, 3/4 or more of the students that schools are serving are not what anyone would stereotypically think of as homeless. The families don't think of themselves that way. Your school staff probably don't think of the families that way. So that word homeless can really make it very difficult to do the appropriate identification. I did a project just recently in a school district in Southern California, and we actually polled and surveyed and did focus groups with parents and asked them, how would you want someone to describe this to you? What do you think is a helpful way to describe this program or ask these questions in a way that really means something to you and wouldn't feel intimidating or off-putting? And they really said, focus on, what's available. Say, hey, our school has some resources that we have available to parents and students in certain situations. I think you might be eligible for it. Can I tell you a little bit about it and see if you might be eligible and interested in it? Very vague, very open-ended, but just kind of starting the conversation on a positive note, and really drawing families into that conversation in a way that hopefully feels very safe and very comfortable for them. It's great to include questions and information about the McKinney-Vento Act all over your school and your district information, website, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, your enrollment packets, your online enrollment site, making sure that you're providing information throughout about here's what you do if you had to leave your permanent home, here's what you do if you're staying somewhere that is not your home. Again, not using that word homeless, but just providing people with direction for what to do and who to call and how to get assistance. Ask your parents and students for help. They will spread the word. So much of this is one parent saying to another in a motel, hey, I was talking to Miss Julianelle at school and she was able to help us, you should call her. Or one student saying the same thing to a friend. So again, providing this information to parents and to students. A lot of our scholars have said, let's just talk about this at a big all school pep rally or meeting, spend 5 minutes talking about it so that every student in the school hears about it. Every student knows it might apply to them or it might apply to their friend, and they can share the information. And always ask about younger siblings. Our young children experience homelessness at very high rates as well, and they often are invisible. They might not be connected with an early childhood program. They might not see them. So when you're working with a family and you think homelessness might be an issue, you can also ask them, hey, do you have any children at home who aren't school age yet? We can help connect you to an early Head Start or a Head Start or a preschool or childcare or some other home visiting or early childhood program that you might have available in your community. And we have some of our slides here will have links on them that, again, if you access the slideshow online, you can just click on the link. We have lots and lots of training resources that you can use to train, your teachers, your school resource officers, your school counselors, your administrators, so you don't have to spend time reinventing the wheel. You can grab them from our site, you can download them, you can edit them and just use them however you like. And hopefully that saves you a little bit of time and effort on your end. So I want to spend a little bit of time addressing a scenario as we go through the presentation. We'll come back to this a few times. I just think it might make it a little bit more real for you. I have used a community where I was born and grew up. So for those of you, I know we have some people signed up from Bridgeport and Stanford, and I think we had some people from Norwalk. So some of you are going to be familiar with this map. Otherwise, just take a look at it. Our family is going to move from the left side of the map towards the right, just to orient you. So we have two students, Pablo and Olivia, 15 and 9 years old. They enrolled in Bridgeport Public Schools while living with their mother and her boyfriend in a small apartment in Bridgeport. About a year ago now, last September 2021, they left their home due to domestic violence and moved into their grandmother up in Trumbull, so just a little bit north of Bridgeport. As they prepared to start this school year, they were still in their grandmother's home about a year later. So quick question, we're not going to do a poll on this. You can type yes or no in the chat box if you'd like to, or not sure. After staying with their grandmother for a year, were Pablo and Olivia still eligible for the McKinney-Vento Act's protections as the school year started? What do you think? Yes, no, maybe, not sure. Oh, wow, we have an advanced crowd. I'm seeing about 500 yeses come in the chat box. Yes, absolutely. We want you to really know that the law, and you saw in the definition, there's no time in the law. There's no time limit. Unfortunately, we know that people who have difficulties accessing housing can be a problem that lasts for years. Housing is really expensive. It's really scarce. If you've got an eviction on your record, if you have a job that's not paying you sufficient wages to pay for housing, which these days most jobs are not, this can go on for a while. So they are sharing the housing of others at this point, their grandmother, due to loss of housing. Mom has not been able to find a stable home yet, so they are still eligible for McKinney-Vento this year. These will get a little bit more difficult as we go on. I think, I'm not a teacher, but I think they call that scaffolding or something. We're supposed to kind of ease you into it, so that's what we're trying to do. So let's jump into McKinney-Vento rights. So Pablo and Olivia are eligible for McKinney-Vento. We've established that. So what does that mean? What do they get, so to speak, from that? First thing I want to do, we're going to talk about school of origin first, and I want to define the concept of school of origin for you. It's kind of self-explanatory when you think of the word school of origin, but it does have a very specific legal definition. It is the school the child or youth attended when permanently housed, or the school in which last enrolled. And sometimes that might not be the same school. So sometimes a child could actually have two schools of origin. And if that's the case, then there will be a decision made between those two schools. But that is the definition. The definition does include a preschool. So if Olivia had been 4 instead of 9, she could potentially have a preschool of origin. And it also includes a designated receiving school in a feeder school system. A lot of places don't have feeder school systems. This does not apply to you at all. But if you live in a place where everybody from McKinney Elementary School goes to Vento Middle, regardless of where they live, that's just the trajectory that everybody follows. Vento is the designated receiving school. In that case, Vento actually also would be considered a school of origin when a child is making that switch from elementary to middle, or perhaps from middle to high. So what do we care about the school of origin? Well, McKinney-Vento requires that every LEA, charter school or school district, according to the child or youth's best interests, must keep the student in the school of origin for the duration of homelessness and until the end of the academic year in which the student finds permanent housing. Or another option is the student could be enrolled in the local school. This decision between school of origin and local school really revolves around the best interest of the child or youth. However, there is a presumption in favor of the school of origin. because we know that school stability is good for students. It's good for schools as well. So we always want to err on that side of the equation. And we also want to give priority to the wishes of the parent, or if it's an unaccompanied youth, we're going to give priority to the wishes of the unaccompanied youth. Priority means exactly what it says, priority. It doesn't mean 100% of the time they're going to get what they want, because there may be very compelling reasons why the wish of the parent or the unaccompanied youth is not actually in the student's best interest. And if that happens, there is a dispute process through the McKinney-Vento Act, and you can provide information to the parent or the youth about that process. But that's basically the way this shakes out. You want to give priority to the school of origin, you want to give priority to parent or youth wishes, and then you're looking at the best interest of the student. Things like what educational services are available in the two different schools, and how does that match with the student's needs? Is the student particularly vulnerable to a school transfer because of issues like fear related to domestic violence, or special educational needs, or other reasons? Is the distance so far that it's actually going to be detrimental to the child's education to have to get up so early or get home so late? So we're really focusing on what is best for that student. So let's jump back in. Did I skip a slide here? I did, sorry. Transportation, oh my goodness, I almost skipped the hottest slide of the slideshow. There is a right to transportation to and from the school of origin, because for most of our families, they don't have transportation on their own, and the right to school of origin really is meaningless to them if they don't have a way to get to that school. So there is a requirement to provide transportation to and from the school of origin. There's also a requirement to address transportation barriers. So even if the student's not at the school of origin, if they're at the local school, and they might even be in a walk zone, but for example, maybe there's a domestic violence issue that's really dangerous for that student, or maybe it's a really, really busy and dangerous intersection and they can't cross it by themselves safely. So in that case, it's really about having a conversation with the parent. You know, maybe we can match you with a walking buddy. Maybe we can have a crossing guard or a volunteer to help students cross that street. If it's affecting one student, it's probably affecting others as well. So this might be a good intervention for lots of kids. So looking at addressing those barriers so that students can get to school, and that they also can get to extracurricular activities. A lot of times, again, this might be matching families with other students who are on the same sport or participating in the same activity. And these requirements apply regardless of what is done for other students. So even if, for example, a charter school doesn't provide transportation to anyone, there's still a requirement for McKinney-Vento transportation. And this can be cooperative among different districts and among different charters. So for example, looks like we have somebody unmuted. For example, if a student's living in one school district and attending another, then those two school districts can work together to split the cost, to split the responsibility for arranging the transportation. We know that transportation is extraordinarily difficult this year. It always has been, but it's worse now than ever. We do have a document on our website with ideas, creative ideas for how to do transportation. We've been adding to that document as we hear new things, so you can access that. I don't know if Karen, if you're still available, if you want to pop the link to that in the chat box. It's Karen's document she created. It's really great. So you can take a look at that and try to get some ideas, because we do appreciate that this is extremely difficult for you this year. Now let's check back in with Pablo and Olivia, and we're going to give you the opportunity to answer this one in a poll this time. So what happened now is that last week, unfortunately, the whole family was evicted because the grandmother's landlord found out that they were all living there in violation of lease terms. So they all had to move in with an aunt now who's up in Milford. At this point, given that she's in Milford, mom has decided that she's basically bailing on Bridgeport at this point. She's going to focus on looking for work between Milford and New Haven. So given this spec scenario, do you think that Pablo and Olivia should continue to attend their school of origin in Bridgeport now on whatever date today is, September 15th? So Erin, if you can launch that poll for me again, since I'm not able to do it, we'll see what people think. While you're doing the poll, I'm assuming you're probably finishing it up. I will mention one quick thing I saw in the chat. about charter schools, this is an important clarification. You did hear correctly. If a charter school does not provide transportation for other students, they are still subject to the McKinney-Vento transportation requirements. So they do have to provide that transportation. It doesn't have to be a yellow school bus. A lot of schools are doing all kinds of creative things that you're going to see in that document that Karen provided for you. Things like providing bikes to students, providing gas vouchers or reimbursement or mileage, providing vouchers for public transportation if you have public transportation available. I talked to a district the other day that's actually renting a car for a family because that was much cheaper than any other option that they had available. Some districts use vans or Suburbans for McKinney-Vento students. So there's lots and lots of different ways to do that, but that it is required. Erin, do you think you could share the poll results and just kind of talk us through it really quickly?
Sure thing. So I just shared those results. It looks like 42% of people who responded said yes to the question, 14% said no, 36% need more information, and 8% are not sure how to decide.
Thanks, Erin. I'm gonna give the victory there to the people who need more information, although I think also the yeses and the nos could be true because you might be thinking about different aspects of this fact scenario in your heads, maybe based on some students you've been working with this year. We really don't know exactly what Pablo and Olivia's educational needs are. We don't know if they're really involved in school activities. We don't know if maybe one of them has an IEP. We don't know a lot of details about them at all, other than their ages and geographically where they are. But certainly the distance between Milford and Bridgeport in and of itself would not be a disqualifying factor. It's not that far. I used to live there. I know the traffic is terrible, and that's a consideration. Sometimes traffic and weather are considerations, but also just thinking about even there potentially might be options of public transportation, taking the Metro North train down there. So we probably do need a little more information, but just remember that we always do want to err in favor of keeping them in their school of origin. And of course, we want to talk with their mom and see what she thinks. Remember, this is a domestic violence situation. She might feel like, I don't know what's going on at this point, if it's sketchy for them to be at Bridgeport with her all the way up in Milford. So we're going to want to have that conversation. In terms of transportation, if they do stay at Bridgeport at their school of origin, then yep, they would be entitled to that transportation. And again, it could be a lot of different varieties of ways to make that transportation work for them, depending on the situation and what's available in that community. So let's move on to immediate enrollment. We're a little bit more than halfway through at this point, and then we'll be stopping for some questions. Immediate enrollment really is the reason that the McKinney-Vento Act was passed initially, way back in 1987, because students were trying to enroll in school. They couldn't prove residency because they were experiencing homelessness and they couldn't enroll. So that was, way back 30 years ago, or a little bit more, 35, what this law was all about. And a few years ago, we did a survey of students and found that still almost 2/3 of McKinney-Vento students said that proof of residency was posing a challenge for them when enrolling in a new school. So we know we still have work to do on this, just transferring school records and getting our students into school right away so they don't have to miss days in between when they change schools or when they change housing situations. So what the McKinney-Vento Act says is that students are entitled to immediate enrollment. That's directly from the law, immediate enrollment, even without required documents such as school records, immunization and other required health records, proof of residency, guardianship, or other documents. So again, we want to get our students into school immediately, and then we want to worry about these paperwork requirements, but we're going to do that after they're in school, in a desk, participating fully in school. Again, this is all of this applies equally to preschools as well. I should keep saying that so I don't forget, and equally to charter schools. And enrollment means attending classes and participating fully in school activities. It means they're there in school just like any other student. And then maybe, we're going to request the school records from the previous school. That's going to include immunization and other health records. If it's, we'll talk about unaccompanied youth in a minute, but guardianship issues, sometimes we get questions of, well, what if a student comes in with some adult and we have no idea if that adult's a guardian or parent or what, and we sort of get kind of a creepy feeling about it. I've had this happen, that a number of liaisons in schools have said this to me. Well, I say I would way rather have that student with that creepy feeling in school with us, where we can be keeping an eye on them and try to figure out what's going on with the situation, than to say, no, you can't enroll, and send them out with someone who may be a sex trafficker or a labor trafficker or some other kind of exploitation might be happening. So again, we want to deal with the questions and the issues that come up, but we want to make sure that child is in school while we deal with it. And an immediate means without delay. So pretty much that's going to mean same day. Obviously, if they walk in at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we're not going to stick them in a classroom for 15 minutes, but it really means immediate. Unaccompanied youth, as I mentioned, they do absolutely have the right to enroll immediately as well. McKinney-Vento is really different from, IDEA or FERPA or any of the other acronym federal education laws that you know of, because McKinney-Vento does give rights directly to youth, separate from the rights of their parents and guardians, and even above the rights of their parents and guardians. And a lot of times parents aren't really happy about that, but that is what the federal law says. So they have their wishes are given priority around enrollment, choosing between that school of origin and local school, like we talked about, and even to file disputes. Unaccompanied youth can file disputes on their own behalf. So again, with disputes, a dispute might arise over, is that student a McKinney-Vento eligible student or not? Is school of origin in their best interest or not? Can they participate in football or not? Any of those dispute or questions that arise, parents and also unaccompanied youth need to be given access to a dispute process to resolve any of those disputes if they arise. Practically speaking, charter schools and school districts do unaccompanied youth enrollment in lots of different ways, and the procedure really is not important. What's important is that there's no delay and that youth can enroll in school immediately. I would say around the country, by far the most common procedure is for youth to just enroll themselves in school and essentially sign their own paperwork as though they were their parent, because the McKinney-Vento Act does give them the right to do that. So let's jump back in with Pablo and Olivia again. I think this is going to be the last time that we're going to come back to them. So now we have yet another move. So assume for the purposes of this conversation that we actually did keep these students in their school of origin in Bridgeport. So throughout all of this transition and evictions and moving around and domestic violence, at least they've been able to stay in the same school. Now we're a little bit later this fall, maybe we're in November, let's say. Mom finds a job in New Haven. She's really excited about that. And they move into a motel in New Haven so that the mom can be closer to her job. And she's going to look for housing in New Haven now. So we're up at on the top right corner of the map now. So now that Pablo and Olivia are up in New Haven, should they transition to a school in New Haven? And this is going to be basically the same conversation that we had before on the previous slide. We're a lot further now. New Haven to Bridgeport, that's a haul. That might have them getting up very, very, very early in the morning. It might have them getting home very late. They might be stuck in traffic for an hour and a half on I-95. So, we want to look at how is this going to impact their education? Again, like I said, we don't know anything about their special needs or what they have going on in Bridgeport. So we need to really evaluate the situation. What I would say is if we're having this conversation in November, one thing we might think about is if they are going to switch schools and go to New Haven now, maybe we look at doing that after the holidays. So rather than uprooting them now, particularly Pablo, who's probably on a semester schedule in high school, we don't know what's happening with Olivia, but it might be smoother to move them after the holiday than to move them now. So for a few weeks, we try Bridgeport and see how it works. So again, you're just going to have that conversation with the parent and figure out what's in the best interest of the students. But let's actually do one last poll. And instead of school of origin, let's say mom and everybody agrees, yeah, Bridgeport is not going to work. We're going to go ahead and enroll in New Haven. Can they enroll immediately in a charter school or a traditional public school in New Haven? Again, let's say it's November 4th. Can we get them into school today? So Erin, if you would launch that poll for me, let's see what folks think. Erin, I will rely on you to decide when you think most people have participated and go ahead and share that out on your time.
Great, let's give it maybe 10 more seconds.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to end the poll and share the results. It looks like 56% of people who responded said yes for both. 25% said yes for both as long as there is a space. And then about 10% yes for the traditional public school, but not the charter. We had about 8% who said not sure, and 1% said no for both unless they have school records.
Ooh, nice. Okay, thank you, Erin. So the answer here is yes, as long as there is space in the appropriate classrooms in the charter school. So, public schools, we have to get students in all the time, no matter what. For charter schools, immediate enrollment also does apply, but sometimes the charter typically might establish a limit on how many students can be in a particular class. So that would depend on what class Olivia and Pablo are going into and whether there's space there. If there's not space, then we can put them at the top of the waiting list as long as that's in line with the charter, and hopefully get them in as soon as possible. So again, even if they don't have documents, I did see a question, and I'm thinking this might come from the state of Washington, because I know the life-threatening condition, I know that state law in Washington that students need to have a health plan before they can start school. And McKinney-Vento does create an exception to that as well. So the student does have the right to start immediately, even without that. Again, we want to get that plan in place on an expedited basis, particularly if it's a student who might need to take medication or might need an EpiPen or something like that. But we do need to get them in school right away. So I kind of wanted to flip this a little bit just to make sure that we touch on unaccompanied youth in the scenario as well, because we know this happens. Pablo and his mom might have a fight. He doesn't want to move to New Haven. He's really unhappy about it. Maybe he has been going through a lot of trauma related to the domestic violence, and he's just having a lot of trouble in his relationship with his mom, and they have a big fight, and he moves out, and he ends up staying with a friend in Stratford. And now he's essentially what we would call double up, couch surfing, etc. So in this case, if Pablo's on his own, can he continue to attend his school of origin? The answer is yes. And in this case, since he's local, he's in Stratford, he's just one town over, distance isn't going to be an issue. Particularly since he's a high school student, we really want to try to keep him in that same high school. We don't want to run into any potential troubles with having to make credits match up from one school system to another. So it probably makes a lot of sense for him to go ahead and stay in Bridgeport. On the other hand, if for whatever reason he would rather go to the local school, maybe his friend goes there and he wants to go to school with his friend, that's easier for him. So if he decides that he would rather enroll in a Stratford public school, he can do that as well. And like I said, he can enroll on his own. So maybe mom calls up and says, I want him back home. I'm really mad at him. I want him to go to New Haven. As long as he is living in a homeless situation and he is not in the physical custody of a parent or guardian, he's really the person that the school needs to be dealing with around issues of choosing what school to go to and arranging transportation and all of those things. So I know that's very unusual and maybe uncomfortable, but that's the way the McKinney-Vento Act sort of deals with that issue of youth rights versus parental rights. Okay, so our very last topic, and then we're going to dive into more questions with you, is removing barriers. And this, again, is a direct quote from the McKinney-Vento Act on your slide here. At both the state and local level, there's a requirement to review and revise policies to remove barriers to identification, enrollment, and retention of McKinney-Vento students in school. That includes barriers related to fees, fines, or absences. So for example, a student has a fee because they didn't return a library book last year or this year, and someone says, well, you can't use the library anymore until you return the book. But if they can't use the library, they can't do their homework. That's a barrier. We need to go ahead and make sure that they can still use the library, whether we forgive the fee, waive the fee. Maybe you have some donated funds or other funds to go ahead and pay the fee. That part doesn't necessarily matter under the federal law. Under the federal law, what matters is that there aren't barriers to the student participating fully in school. Same thing with absences. We hear sometimes, if you miss 5 or 10 consecutive days, you're out, you're disenrolled, you're out of the district. We can't apply those kinds of rules to our students experiencing homelessness because that's, of course, a barrier to participating in school. We want them to attend, we need them to attend. We know that they're much more likely to be chronically absent than other students because of their living situation and the trauma and the other issues that they're going through. So in that case, the appropriate response would be to try to figure out what's causing the absences. Are there interventions we can put in place to try to address that? What can we put in place with the parent or youth to try to make this work so that they don't miss so much school? Because of course we want them in school every day. And we have a link on our slide there with some tips from us that we've stolen from school districts around the country around how to support attendance for students experiencing homelessness. So You can imagine that when you have an unstable housing situation and there might be abuse and there might be a lot of other traumatic issues going on, there are a lot of barriers to enrolling in school and to participating fully and staying in school. And so I really look at this clause as kind of giving schools tools to say, this student's having trouble attending, this student needs different clothing, this student needs hygiene supplies, this student needs assistance with transportation, whatever. This is a tool to say we've got to do this for the student because it's the McKinney-Vento Act, it's a McKinney-Vento student, whether we use McKinney-Vento funds, whether we use ARPA funds, whether we use Title I funds. There is a required Title I set aside. So you all should hopefully be able to access Title I funds to help remove some of these barriers. This is kind of a tool to be able to do that for your students. As I said, there are so many barriers. One of the things that I think is really important is that whatever you have in your district, right now, especially with ARPA funds, a lot of districts have more tutoring than ever, more after school programs, sometimes more summer enrichment, making sure that that your staff at your district or your school is really addressing how are our McKinney-Vento students going to get there? How are we going to make sure they participate? How, can we prioritize them? Can we get them transportation so that they're able to access the services that you're providing to all students or perhaps to all low-income students in your district or in your school? Students tell us that one of the most important things is just having a person at school who they know is their person. It doesn't have to be a teacher. My mother was a school secretary and she was this person for a lot of students where she would just see them in the hallway and she would just say, hey, how are you doing? I hope you have a good day. Or she'd say, hey, I didn't see you yesterday. What happened? Do you need anything? She wasn't their teacher, but she was an adult who noticed them and cared about them and talked to them every day. And that made a huge difference. And, they knew she was someone that they could ask for help. So having that relationship is really critical for so many of our McKinney-Vento students. So regular check-ins, watching their attendance and intervening quickly, not when they've missed 10 days, but when they've missed 1 or 2 days. Hey, what happened? Why couldn't you make it? How can we support you? We really missed you. What can we put in place to help you get to school? Partial credits is something that I always like to talk about. The McKinney-Vento Act actually requires the award of partial credits for our students experiencing homelessness. So for example, if Pablo is in Bridgeport schools until November, and then he says, no, I'm moving to Stratford now, well, he absolutely needs to get some kind of credits from Bridgeport, even if he didn't finish the whole semester. They need to do some kind of calculation so that they send him to Stratford with something. And then Stratford's going to go ahead and give him partial credits for what he does November and December. Then we put those partial credits together and he doesn't have to lose his progress for the semester. So that is a requirement for our students experiencing homelessness as well. All right, removing barriers to extracurricular participation. Just wanted to highlight how important extracurricular activities are for McKinney-Vento students. A lot of times that's where they have that adult connection that they need so badly. That's where they have peer connections. That's how they're going to get into college or other post-secondary opportunities. So working on things like transportation, paying for those uniforms, the cheer uniform, the cleats, helping them get what they need to be able to participate so that they don't run into those barriers. Sometimes we hear that, well, you haven't lived in the district long enough, so you can't play varsity sports, or, you came in mid-year, you can't play. All of those barriers, again, remember, those need to be waived, revised and redone for our McKinney-Vento students so that they can participate fully. And we've got there on your slide a link to a brief with a lot more information about that. Last thing I want to mention, for those of you who are at the high school level, working with unaccompanied youth for the free application for federal student aid, the FAFSA, unaccompanied youth are automatically considered independent students. So they do not have to provide parental income information or a parental signature. So this is a really important thing for students to know early on, because a lot of our students by 9th or 10th grade, they're already saying, well, my mom's not going to sign my FAFSA, so there's no way I'm going to college, so why bother? So letting them know early that, no, actually, you can do this on your own, completely on your own, is really important. And I won't go into too much detail on this. We have a lot of resources on our website about the FAFSA. You can see the link there. Our colleague Jillian Sitar is fantastic. So you're welcome to contact us with questions or take a look at those resources to see how you can help your students who are going to be completing that new FAFSA, which comes out in just a couple of weeks. All right, so let's do one last poll, and then we're going to do Q&A, and then we're going to do these breakout rooms. So our last poll is really about how we can help you. And I put some questions in the poll, so Erin, if you can launch that, please feel free to go ahead and answer the poll. But in addition, I invite you to type into the chat box, if you have specific resources that you'd like to see us produce, specific ways that you think that we can help you, whether you're from a state agency, an advocacy agency, a community agency, a school district, or a charter school. We really do want to know what we can do to help you. So let us know. And Erin, I'll put you in charge again of whenever you think the poll is pretty much wrapping up. If you could share that out. And in the meantime, everyone, please do feel free to type your ideas into the chat box.
Let's give it maybe 10 to 15 more seconds and then I'll end and share.
Thanks, Erin. I can quickly say someone is asking about pre-recorded webinars. What we do is we do archive all of our webinars on our website. So this one and every one that we've done, I think if you go on our website under Learn and then under Webinars, you'll see a section for archived webinars. And those include all of the PowerPoints and handouts, and you can see all of those anytime.
Okay. So it looks like we had a lot of people indicate they could use some help with more advanced McKinney-Vento webinars. A good number of people indicated they want some more basic McKinney-Vento 101 webinars, followed by continuing to advocate for more funding, producing more documents and toolkits. And then a few folks selected doing more webinars on particular topics. And then you can see the other options coming into the chat box.
Thanks, Erin. That's great. I've been watching the chat boxes come in. I would recommend definitely take a look at our website. Again, under that Learn button, for example, we have a whole tab on unaccompanied homeless youth. I see that there were some questions about that. I saw that there were also some questions about immigrant students. One thing that I like a lot about our website, because there's a lot of information on there, and I'll be honest, it can be hard to find things. But if you go to our homepage on the left, sort of near the bottom, there's a little thing that looks like a magnifying glass, and that's our search box. And you can type, for example, the word immigrant in that search box, and it's going to pull up all of the documents that we have related to immigration. You can type transportation, you can type IDEA, special education. So that's a really useful way to find out what we have already. But these are great ideas for things, additional things that we can do in the future. So I appreciate that very, very much. All right, it is Q&A time for us. Karen, I don't know if you've seen any questions that you wanted to kind of raise to my attention and make sure that we hit verbally over the webinar. If you want to ask me any, otherwise I can jump in the chat box too and see what we can find.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been keeping track. So I've been trying to answer them as they've been coming in. So I apologize for those that I've missed, but a couple questions that came up at the beginning. People that are choosing to live together to share housing and expenses, are those typically McKinney-Vento families, or because they're choosing to share housing, are they considered permanently housed?
That's a great question. So we're really looking at the language of the law. So we're looking at sharing the housing of others due to loss of housing, economic hardship, or a similar reason. So I think the word choose can be tricky because somebody could say, well, Pablo and Olivia chose to live with their grandmother, but they did that because due to domestic violence, they lost their housing. They had to leave their housing, and then they kind of had to stay there because of economic hardship. They couldn't move anywhere else. So you are a little bit looking at the reasons and kind of the trigger that brought that family into that situation. But sometimes, absolutely, people live together to share finances, to share the cost. People have roommates. So, you want to look a little bit into the situation. Some of the questions that I think schools typically ask might be something like, well, where would you go if you couldn't stay here? If usually in these situations, someone is the homeowner or the leaseholder for the apartment and someone else is just kind of staying there. So if that person who's staying there, if the leaseholder said, like grandma said, hey, my landlord found out you're here, you've got to get out, where would they go? If the answer is, well, I guess I would rent an apartment somewhere else, it's probably not a McKinney-Vento situation. But if the answer is, I have no idea, or I guess I'd sleep in my car till I figure it out, or I don't know, we'd have to see if my sister would take us in, then those are your McKinney-Vento situations.
A couple of questions specific to unaccompanied homeless youth. Youth who choose to live with a significant other or another person like a grandparent because they're not getting along with their family. At what point does that arrangement become a permanent arrangement?
Yeah, I think, initially those are definitely going to be McKinney-Vento situations because, that I don't get along with my parent is code for a lot of things. I mean, I've heard a lot of our scholars say, I just wasn't getting along with my mom. And then you dig a little bit deeper and you find out that there was, some prostitution happening in the home or abuse or, other things where the child was really at risk and they just don't want to say that because they're trying to protect their parents. So, certainly you're going to want to qualify them initially. I think over time, usually through contact with the youth or with the parent, you're going to kind of get a feel for, is this a stable, permanent arrangement with an alternate caregiver, and everybody's on board with it, and the space is adequate in the home, and the adults in the home are like, absolutely, we're here for the long haul. They're just going to live with us now. I had a situation like that in my family where my stepdaughter went to live with her aunt, and it was a family decision. Everybody was on board with it. Everybody sort of said, yeah, this is going to be better for everyone. She's going to live there. She actually lived there until she graduated from college. So, that can happen. It can happen. That is not a McKinney-Vento situation, but I would say that's certainly the exception and not the rule.
And then another question, can we legally ask who they are doubled up with?
So you certainly can ask kind of where a family is staying, because that, when we talked about school of origin, right, we said the student's either going to stay in the school of origin or they're going to enroll in any school that someone living where they're actually living would be eligible to attend. So you kind of need to know where they're staying so that you know what school they're eligible to attend, whether that's a charter school, attendance area school, magnet school, whatever, alternative school, whatever they might be eligible for. A lot of times families don't want to give too much information because oftentimes the person they're staying with has said, you can't tell anybody you're staying here because I'm going to get evicted if somebody finds out. Or they might be really afraid because of domestic violence, or sometimes we hear about families who are staying in a car and they don't really want to say where their car is parked because they're afraid law enforcement is going to come and force them to move. So it's definitely fair to ask, for some kind of an address or a location, even recognizing that, for example, for a family in a car, that might change every night. But yes, you can ask. Now, what you cannot ask for is proof. So, well, go to the family you're staying with and make them write us a letter that says, Patricia Julianell is staying at my house at this address. And the reason you can't ask for that is because the family probably can't get it. And then that's going to be a barrier to immediate enrollment. So that's definitely a hard no.
All right, another question about IEPs. So if a student needs to have records of their IEPs with them to be placed in the appropriate classroom, however, but due to homelessness, they don't have that documentation and they haven't been at one school long enough to complete the evaluation, can they be suspended due to behavior if the classroom is inappropriate? Or can they delay enrollment and starting until that IEP is obtained?
Oh, that's a deep question. That has so many layers. That's a great one. I'll try to give sort of a short-ish answer because we could talk about this for a couple of hours. But basically, under both McKinney-Vento and the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, students, whether they have an IEP already or whether they're in the process of being evaluated to see if they're eligible for those services, they do have the right to immediate enrollment immediately. And IDEA calls that a free appropriate public education, but basically it means, yes, we have to get them to school right away. We cannot keep them out because we're doing an evaluation or because we're waiting on the records from, the previous school or anything like that. So essentially, I recognize that puts the school in a difficult position of trying to figure out, well, where do we put the student if we don't really know what they need? And so, it's going to sound kind of silly, but it usually can be something like, a teacher calls a teacher from the previous school, or maybe the school psychologist calls a school psychologist from the previous school and says, hey, where are you in the process? Do they have an IEP or not? Are you in the middle of the evaluation? What were you doing to support this student? And then thinking about, okay, what can we put in place that's similar? So if they already have an IEP, IDEA is really clear on that. You've got to provide them with services comparable to what's in their IEP immediately, even if that IEP is from another school district, from another state. As long as it's current, you've got to essentially implement that IEP to the best of your ability, provide them with comparable services to what's in the IEP immediately. If they're still in the process of the evaluation, they haven't gotten to the eligibility or IEP part of that yet, then what the new school needs to do is pick up where the old school left off. So don't start over from scratch. The timeline keeps going, the clock keeps ticking. It does not start over again in the new school for highly mobile students. Again, that's an IDEA. So you've got to continue the evaluation process and provide them with the best services you can. Any kind of school discipline, it depends on where they are in that IDEA process. I'm not going to go into that because that's super complicated, but your special education team should know, what is the appropriate response to discipline. But also just remember, for students experiencing homelessness, they are dealing with a lot of trauma. And sometimes they're going to act in ways that, are not perfect for a school classroom. And, using those positive discipline strategies, trying to find out why they're acting that way, what can we put in place to try to help, and really trying to keep them in school. Because, when you send a homeless student home, where do they go? We really don't know, and they probably don't have anywhere to go to. So, those kind of discipline procedures really should be very carefully considered.
There are a couple of transportation questions. So
Okay.
first, transportation across state lines. Is that a thing, and how does that work?
Yeah, great. So yes, that is a thing. A lot of times, depending on your geographic place, if you're in Kansas City, you're going to have students crossing between Kansas and Missouri to go to their school of origin all the time. If you're in the tri-state area in New York, I could have had Pablo and Olivia going into New York State for school, depending on where they were located. So yes, that is a thing. And it's just the same as any other decision about school of origin. Is it in their best interest?
And then another question about extracurricular activities. Is transportation required for extracurriculars, and are those only for school extracurricular activities, not something like that would happen in the community?
Yeah, great question. So it is only for school activities. I have definitely seen situations where it's a school of origin situation. And so the school district is providing the child with transportation home after school. But let's say the student is actually in, karate after school. And so karate is right by home. So they just go ahead and drop them off at karate instead of dropping them off at home. So that's kind of an incidental benefit if you want to look at it that way. So that would be fine. But typically transportation to community activities that are not school related would not be required. For school related extracurricular activities, what the Department of Education has said in their guidance on this is what I said on the slide. It's really about addressing the barrier to transportation. So I think commonly it's about helping students and parents find each other. I don't know about all of you, but when I was in high school, I didn't have a car, I didn't have transportation. How did I get to my tennis practice? I went with other kids. And we want our McKinney-Vento students to feel just like everybody else. The last thing you want is them to sort of show up in a taxi to football practice and everybody's looking at them and saying, what's up with that? So not saying that there aren't occasions where that would be appropriate. I'm sure there are, but I think a lot of times it's just helping the family and or the student to think about, what are some ways that I can get there? Is it a gas voucher? Is it a bus pass? Is it just connecting me with somebody who can drive me? Maybe I'm new to the school. I don't know anybody yet. So help me connect to the coach or someone. So yeah, you do need to address those barriers to extracurricular activities. I think we have time for one more.
Perfect. I've got one more good one for you. Do we need proof to state that families are homeless, or do we take them at their word?
Great question. Essentially, you take them at their word because it's so difficult to prove homelessness. You can prove that you're housed because you have a lease or a mortgage, but to prove that you're not housed, you don't have a lease or a mortgage is pretty hard. And like I said, a lot of times if there's family, 3/4 of our families are sharing the housing of others. And a lot of those folks do not want that to be public knowledge because they're afraid, like I said, of getting evicted themselves. So we really are just, talking with parents. Now, there are occasions, just like any law, how many of us haven't sped or run a red light? Like just like any law, there are going to be occasions where somebody, might be trying to use this for some purpose that's not really what it's made for. So you might get a feeling that, I don't really think they're living there, or the bus driver says that they're not there when the bus goes by, but they see somebody dropping them off in a car and it just sort of feels weird. So, there are occasions where schools will say, we're going to have the school social worker just go out there and kind of do a home visit and bring them some school supplies and some hygiene supplies and just sort of check on the situation. And as long as you're doing that in a way that's very careful and not intimidating or aggressive, you can do that on a case-by-case basis when you get those feelings that maybe this isn't exactly what we're being told. But yeah, for the most part, we're just having conversations with parents and students and kind of taking them at their word, because that's really kind of the only alternative most of the time. I do want to mention the dispute process one more time. I have mentioned it a few times, but again, there is a McKinney-Vento dispute process. So if a school district really thinks, you know what, we really don't think that you're McKinney-Vento eligible, even though you're telling us that you are, then you would use that dispute process. So you would provide the parent or the youth in writing with an explanation for why we think you're not eligible. And here's how to access the dispute process. The dispute process usually starts at the district or local level and then can be taken up to the state level. And while that process is pending, the student does absolutely have the right to continue to attend school in the school where enrollment is sought. So if they're saying they're McKinney-Vento and they want to go to their school of origin, we're going to go ahead and keep them there while they go through the dispute process. So we have a number of resources to share. We have, like I said, we have lots of stuff on our website. These are just a few that I picked out that I thought might be particularly helpful. I know we had a lot of charter schools who registered for today, so I put our charter school toolkit up there. We have a Facebook group. So if you use Facebook, it's a great way to connect with peers, ask questions, share resources, share documents. So take a look at that. Sign up for a newsletter, particularly if you want to hear when our online modules are ready. Sign up for that newsletter and you'll be the first to know. And now I want to talk to you about our breakout time. So we're going to have about 20 minutes for this. Hopefully, if you read the description of this webinar, you saw that we are going to provide opportunities for people to gather in their own school district, in their own community, in their own state. So we have created 38 breakout rooms specifically based on today's registration list. Don't do anything yet. I'm gonna get you there in a second. But what I'm gonna ask you to do is scroll through the list of breakout rooms. They're in alphabetical order by state. So if you're in Florida, go to Florida and then see if your school district is there. So if we had a bunch of people, for example, from Polk County, we had so many that I gave Polk County their own room. So go ahead to your state. If you see your district or your community, you can jump into that room. If you don't see your district community, just jump into your state. If you don't see your state, it means that there weren't a lot of people from your state who registered. So then you can go to where it says US, and then you can just choose your region, Eastern, Central, Mountain, or Pacific. This is your choice. You decide where you want to go. We're not going to put you in a room. We're going to let you go where you like. Give me 1 second. We're going to get you to the breakout rooms in just 1 second. I just want to make sure you understand the instructions first, or it's going to be confusing for you. At the very end of the breakout room list, after the states, we also have some specific rooms for the Bureau of Indian Education. We had a number of BIE folks join us, which we were really excited about. We also have a group specifically for charter schools, early childhood programs, and a group specifically for post-secondary. So they're at the very end after all the states. So if you're with a charter school, scroll all the way to the bottom and you can join the charter school group. Or if you'd rather join your state group, absolutely do that. It's completely your choice. Now, the way to join a breakout room, when we enable the breakout rooms, this is kind of confusing. So you'll see you're going to click breakout rooms in your meeting control. You should have little sort of 4 little boxes that says breakout rooms. If you don't see those 4 little boxes in breakout rooms, then click on the 3 dots that says more, and the breakout rooms are going to be hiding behind those 3 dots. So you're going to hit the breakout rooms. Once the breakout rooms open, you need to find the group that you want, and then you need to hover your pointer. This is very complicated, but this is the way it works. You hover your pointer over the number to the right of the group you wish to join, and then you'll see the join box. If you don't hover your pointer, you might not see the join box, and you'll say, how do I join? How do I join? So hover your pointer over the number next to the breakout room, then you'll click on join, confirm by clicking join, and then you'll go into your room. And the purpose of these rooms is for you to do whatever you want to do in it. Our suggestion is that you introduce yourselves quickly. You might want to share your contact information in the chat. So maybe if you want to keep networking after these 20 minutes, you can continue to network. So introduce yourselves, share your contact information. We invite you to share one strategy or thing that you're doing so far this school year that you think is working. What's something that you're excited about that you think is being successful and working? Share that. And then we invite you to share, ask any questions about challenges, ask for input from your peers. We're really struggling with X. Do you guys have any ideas for how to help us with that? So that's what we're suggesting you do in these breakout rooms. But again, it's your room. Do what you want. We are here to provide you with the opportunity to network with others from your community, your state, or your sort of subject area. So remember, hover over the number to the right of the breakout room you wish to join. And with that, I am going to see if I can launch the breakout rooms. I'm going to open up all the rooms and you can go ahead and jump in. Okay, breakout rooms are open. So click on the little breakout room with those 4 boxes on it, or click on more to find your breakout rooms hidden. Scroll through, choose the room you want to join, hover your pointer over the number to the right of that room, click join, and you will be able to be in your breakout room. And we're just going to have these go at least 20 minutes. If you want to stay in there longer, we're not going to kick you out. You can stay in your breakout room and talk to each other for an hour if you want to. Feel free to use our Zoom for as long as you would like to. We're going to leave it open for you, but we won't be bringing you back to the full room. So you're on your own now. We hope that this is useful to you. If you are really, really struggling to enter your breakout room and you just can't hover that pointer and you can't get in the room, please go ahead and type in the chat box for us what room you want to be in, and we will try to manually assign you to that room, but that's going to take us some time, so you have to be patient with us. But if you really can't get into your room, type to us in the chat box, hey, I want to go into, the charter group, and we'll try to manually put you into the charter group. And I see lots and lots and lots of you moving into your groups, so terrific. Congratulations. You're vanquishing Zoom today. If you don't see your state, it may be because we didn't have enough people from your state to create a whole room for you. So then just go to where it says US, and you can choose US Eastern, US Central, US Mountain, or US Pacific. If you can't see the breakout rooms, again, you should see where it says breakout rooms with the little 4 boxes. If not, there should be 3 dots and where it says more. And if you click on those 3 dots, you should find it. And if you still don't find it, it may be that you don't have an updated version of Zoom. That may be the problem. So we will try to help you move into groups to the best of our ability. And for those of you who are still with us, we are not going to continue here in the main room because we basically concluded our presentation. We're just going to give you this time to be in the breakout rooms.
Hi, Patricia, really quick. I'm noticing, and maybe this is something that we can use as a data trend, that the early childhood and post-secondary don't have people in them. So, and the Bureau of Indian Education, as well as US Central. And I was like, dang it. So I was wondering if you and the group would be willing to maybe have some like specific areas of focus. Hi, sorry, my tech is weird. Areas of focus around that, because those are some of the areas that I know I need support in.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, since I'm presenting, I can't actually see you. Who's talking?
Oh, this is Pam Janelle from Nevada. Yeah,
hey,
Nevada
Pam,
Department
hi.
of Ed. Hey, what's going on, people? Hi.
Yeah. So listen, I know that Erin has been doing a lot of great early childhood sessions, and our colleague Jillian is going to be doing some post-secondary in October.
Okay.
So we are definitely going to be doing those. It's so hard to know who registers and who actually shows up for a meeting. So we had some post-secondary register, and sometimes people can't make it. So I didn't want to leave them without a room. But yeah, so definitely keep an eye out for those opportunities, because they will be coming. And in terms of BIE, we're hoping to be doing some work with them, early next year. So hopefully we do have an archived webinar, a really great archived webinar on our site, where we had 3 liaisons, 2 who work actually on a reservation and 1 who works in a community that has a lot of Native students. And they did a fantastic webinar. It's been a while now, but if you go to the archived webinars on our website, you'll find it. They did a terrific job on that webinar. So take a look in the archive webinars for that.
Yeah, I think I've had the opportunity of also just having a quick meeting with one of our, yeah, because I believe she was in one of the central states, and we had a conversation a couple months ago about some ideas because of, we were meeting with Jacinda, and we were having our, one of our meetings, our capacity building things. So yeah, thank you very much. That comes definitely full circle. And I'm so excited about the early childhood and post-secondary. Can't wait. All right, well, I will go find my life. I don't know. I guess I can find
I
some
see Vern in US Pacific. You can go bug him.
I know, but we see each other every day.
I know.
I think I'll do, I don't know. All right, see y'all later. It was, and thank you for everything today. I'm so excited. Yeah, we're getting it together in Nevada.
Yeah, I know you are. Thanks, Pam.
All right, see ya. Good to see you, Karen.
All right, if there's anyone who's still in the main room, it looks like we only have about 25 in the main room. If there's any of you who cannot get into a breakout room, but you'd like to get in one, let us know what you'd like to go, and we'll put you in there. We can do that manually. So if you'd like to be moved into a breakout room, you just tell us where to put you, and we'll be glad to do that for you. And if not, that's fine too. I'll stick around here in the main room for a few more minutes as well, if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask who's still in the main room. And Karen and Aaron, if you're still here, you're welcome to bail. I know you both had other things that you needed to attend to, so no need for you all to stick around. I really appreciate your help. Could not have done it without you.
Thanks, Patricia. I am going to log off, and that's going to stop the recording, FYI, but I think that should be okay, right?
Yeah, I think that's fine. Good call. Thank you.
You can stick around.